As Johnny mentioned this morning, our speaker tonight doesn't really need any introduction. Connor McDaniel, we're all familiar with him. I'm glad that Johnny thought to ask about leading singing because that's a neat touch. I will probably, hopefully, never lead singing for any of my children before they preach. Believe me, that's not just me hoping. Trust me, you all hope that as well. So that's neat that Johnny had that opportunity to lead singing before his boy gets up to preach. We were at camp just a few weeks ago, and Connor was, I think, getting ready to teach a class. Was it Olivia that taught out there that weekend, or Victoria? It's one of them, Victoria. She was teaching also, but Johnny had come out to see Connor teach, and we were talking, and I realized August the 11th was going to be Connor's last Sunday full-time here at Bremen. Not the last Sunday here at Bremen. He'll be home from time to time, but getting ready to go to Freed-Hardeman, just having completed high school, graduating from Bremen this past May. And so we were talking about that, and so I got to thinking, and so I sent the elders a text, and I said, be Connor's last Sunday here, at least regularly. What do y'all think about having Connor preach Sunday evening? And I told them in that text, I said, I don't believe I've ever heard Connor preach. Because so often it happens, he'll be at another congregation or he'll be here when I'm not. And it's funny because when the elders texted back and they said, sure, sounds great, let's plan for it. So I told Connor that afternoon, I said, Connor, you busy August the 11th? You want to preach that Sunday night? He said, absolutely. He said, where are you going to be? I said, I'm going to be right there at Bremen listening to you. I want to hear you preach. Connor, come preach the word.
I've climbed into this pulpit I don't know how many times in my life, and none of it ever felt like that. I don't think I've ever been introduced before, Chad, so thank you. Yes, Chad did ask me to speak. What he didn't know when he asked me was I was actually going to ask him if I could, this being my last Sunday here full-time. The last time I stood before all of you was to teach a class this past May. That Sunday, I was preparing for the week of graduation festivities, getting ready to do that Friday night. This Friday night, I will be moving. I'll leave my house, and we'll pack up the cars, and we will make the trek to Tennessee, me and my parents, and a lot of people have asked me how I feel about this time in my life, and there's a lot of things that are on my mind, and I told myself I wasn't going to do this, but, some things don't go as planned. And the word that comes to my mind when people ask how this all feels is thankful. I'm thankful to all of you for your help and your guidance and the countless hours I know that you have all spent praying for me and thinking about me. The gifts that you all have given me throughout these months, the questions you've asked me, and the interest you have all shown in me, it means a lot, and I'm thankful for all the years that I've spent here. And most kids in my situation, moving away so far from home, I'm going to graduate with 2 degrees, I'm double majoring. Most kids would be afraid of that. I am ready to face it head on because of the love and the teaching that I have had here at the Bremen Church of Christ, and I am thankful to all of you for that, to my parents and all of my friends. Things change, and that is why tonight, that being on my mind, we are going to talk about making changes. Romans 6, verse 4 says, "We were buried, therefore, with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life." Tonight, the title of our lesson is going to be Making Changes. Change is something I've experienced a lot of over the past few months, and I'm going to experience a lot of this week and in the months and years coming. So that's what I decided I would talk about, and with that, we are going to dive right in. The main thing that people never told me, people, when you get into high school, people always say, are you ready? It's a big change when you get into high school. When you get to the end of high school, it's a big change. Are you ready for that? Yeah, I've never gone off to college. I've never moved away from home, so I really don't know how apprehensive about that experience I should be. And as I said, I'm really not. But one thing that nobody told me I would notice that would change would be the way that I would think. Because that changes as you get older. When you become a Christian, you have to change the way you think. You can't think like the rest of the world tells you to think and the rest of the world wants you to think. But how does the world, what thinking does the world want? The world wants short-term thinking. Let me explain. Ads on television, they're short. You will never see an ad on television anymore. Used to, they would last 90 seconds about, maybe even a full 2 minutes. Now you won't see an ad that lasts longer than 15, maybe 30 seconds. If you watch ads on any streaming platform like YouTube, those ads are only going to last 6 seconds because this world doesn't want you to think in long periods of time. It wants you to think in these short little bursts. It wants your attention for a little bit because it knows that most people are ready to move on to the next thing. We want faster internet. We want faster cell phones. If you see any advertisement on television for this little magic buzzing box right here from any various provider, from Apple or Samsung or Android or what have you, if you see any advertisement from a cellular service provider, any advertisement from a cable company or an internet service provider, they're all going to talk about how they're so much faster than anyone else because they want your service and they know you want it right then because you're not thinking ahead. You want it as soon as possible. The people of the world want to teach you that you need things right now because you're not going to keep them for very long. We want faster cars or higher speed limits. Do you ever find yourself just bumping a little bit over the speed limit for absolutely no reason at all? You just want to get where you're going. You know that you left in time to get there early. You know that there's no way you're going to be late, but it's 55, well, I want to go 60. Or you get mad that there's that one person in front of you that's just driving really safe and they're going 5 under and you get so frustrated, just go the speed limit. But that's the world we live in. It's go, go, go continuously. The world's views on marriage are very short term. This world is going to tells us that when we have our marriages, they're if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's no harm done. People get married all the time. People get divorced all the time. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Most of those are really because people don't think about the long-term effects and consequences and things that go into a good marriage that is going to work because they're told that it really doesn't matter if it does. Views on the use of mind-altering drugs, the use of alcohol, the use of marijuana, the use of nicotine. No one's life has ever been made better by their use of any of these things, unless it was for maybe a medicinal purpose. Nicotine is one that it is so because it's been ingrained in our society from the very foundation of this country. Tobacco has been an export of this nation. But it's interesting because I like to read interviews with famous people or watch them on the internet. And I read one time an interview with Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. And the interview asked him what it was like to quit using all of the drugs that he was on. He said, the most painful one to quit using was heroin. The hardest one to quit using was cigarettes because they're so accessible. The world is not going to teach you that. The world teaches us at these other things that we might use. They're not as accessible. So in the long term, they might be a little bit easier to get off of. But using anything that has nicotine in it, it's always right there. He said I would look down, or if I would just ask somebody, I could have a pack of cigarettes as soon as I wanted it. When the first time he picked it up, he didn't think about the long-term consequences of how easy it would be to always have that right next to him. And the Bible even tells us this world contains temporary things. Everything in this world is going to be burned up. That's what Peter tells us. And in Matthew 6, verse 19, Jesus says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Everything in this world is going to pass away. The things that I have now, for the most part, are not a lot of the things that I possessed 4 years ago when I was at the beginning of high school. I have a lot of things now that I didn't have a year ago. I've spent a lot of time cleaning out my closet, probably about 4 times this summer getting ready to take clothes to school. I don't have as much as I did at the beginning of the summer, except last night we went shopping, so now I have way more than I probably need. But I'll give the world this. Life is short. James tells us that our life is a vapor. It appears for a little bit of time and then vanishes away. Life is short, but for the Christian, it is just the beginning. Life is short here on this earth, but your life as a Christian here on the earth, your life is just the beginning. Paul said to live is Christ and to die is gain, because he knew that while he was living on this earth, if he was living for Jesus, he didn't have to die the same death that the rest of the world lives. So we don't want to think like the world. We don't want to think in this short-term bursts like the world does. So what kind of thinking does God want? Well, there's a difference because the world really doesn't care that much how you think. It wants you to think a certain way, but see, God requires long-term thinking. Christianity requires long-term thinking. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 20, we already read verse 19, but finishing in verse 20, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth or rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. This is comparison language that Jesus is using. He's saying, if you lay up for yourself, the treasures here on earth that you have, they're all going to go away. But there's a place where you can put your treasure, where you can have your treasure, where it won't. He's comparing the two things. Do you want to put your treasure somewhere where it's all going to go away, or somewhere where it's all going to be protected? We have to think ahead when gaining our treasures. We have to think about where we want them. It's not wrong to gain things here on this earth. It's not wrong to gain money. We need that to survive. We need possessions. We need clothes on our backs. We need food in our houses. But treasures in heaven, how are you thinking about how the things that you do on earth are going to affect your relationship with God and whether or not you will get to be with Him in heaven? Here's another interesting one that until I was preparing for this lesson, I didn't really think about. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law of prophets. The golden rule, we've heard it all of our lives. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. There's a reason that it's in a future tense. Because if it was in a past or present tense, it would say, treat people the way they have treated you. That's not what God says. Why does He say that? Because, first of all, it ensures good things for us from others. God wants us to enjoy our lives here on this earth. God wants us to be protected. He wants us to have good experiences. And if you treat other people well, they will treat you well, and that's God taking care of His children. But also, it helps us build relationships. Building relationships we need to help people get to heaven. Treat people the way you want to be treated. I want people to help me get to heaven. I want people to tell me about Jesus. If you want people to help you get to heaven, if you want people to tell you about Jesus and how to help yourself get to heaven and how to grow closer to Him, you've got to tell people about Jesus. You've got to go out there and preach the gospel if you want that to happen. That's a biblical principle. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Teach other people the things that you wish had been taught to you. If you choose not to preach the Bible to the lost, you have chosen to wave at them as they walk away into eternal condemnation. You have the tools, you have the power, you have the reason. It's been given to you. The greatest gift that has ever been given to mankind on this earth is salvation. And you have the opportunity to give it to other people. In long-term thinking, it protects us here on earth. The decisions that I make now, at this point in my life, when I'm 18 years old, are going to affect me for the rest of my life. The decision that I made to go to Freed-Hardeman University is going to be one that is going to follow me through the rest of my life. It is going to follow me in my career as a preacher or anything else that I do. It might follow me if I choose to be a youth minister at some point. My education in the place I chose to get it is going to follow me. That is a huge decision. Eventually, when I get married, that is going to be a big decision, and it's going to follow me, hopefully, for the rest of my life. Long-term thinking protects us. If we're thinking about these things, I don't know what kind of long-term ideas other than that. I haven't been around here very long, comparative to some people, but, I do know things about abstinence and the use of drugs. Why does God tell us to wait until we're married? Well, it's an interesting idea because we had a class at Yes Weekend this past February that Brother Aaron Stice taught, and he said, God doesn't want you to not do things because God doesn't want you to practice abstinence because He doesn't want you to have fun. It's to save you from heartbreak. It's to protect you. And that was something that really stuck with me because I had never really heard it put that way before. I just heard it was safer, it was just a better idea. But it's to protect you from something bad that could also happen to you. The use of drugs, as we already mentioned. I know many people, even my own age, who have already messed up their respective lives because they have chosen a life that would involve alcohol and drugs and the use of these things that would pull them farther away from their friends and farther away from, most of them, from the chance of even finding God here on this earth. The book of Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes are both filled with ideas of thinking ahead. That famous chapter in Proverbs about the virtuous woman that was written so that young men would think about the woman they were choosing to be their wife. That is a long-term idea. I don't have kids yet. That's something I don't see happening for myself for at least 10 to 15 years. That's long-term thinking for me. But now I've got to be thinking about the girls that I date and potentially will marry and who they are going to be as mothers to those children. They've got to be thinking about who I'll be as a father to those children, and I've got to be preparing to be the kind of man that a woman wants to help raise her kids. And the book of Ecclesiastes is filled with this, basically Solomon at the end of his life saying, these are all of the things I did. These are all of the things I didn't think about. And here at the end of my life, you being at whatever point you are in yours, I want you to think about them from now on. The Bible is filled with these ideas of thinking about how your life is going to be from here on out. Even Christianity itself is the fulfillment of a long-term plan. The first prophecy we ever read about Jesus coming down to this earth is in Genesis chapter 3. That God planned what would happen for us from the very foundation of the world. He knew that Jesus was going to come and he was going to die. And he knew that there would be people who would follow him. If God is willing to think that far ahead for us, that shows that he wants us, if we're going to be like him, if we're going to be like Jesus, that we have to think ahead. We have to think about things that will happen in the future. So when we're thinking ahead, we're thinking about these things, what do we do once we're thinking ahead? How do we keep thinking ahead? We've got to change our focus. Focus is a very difficult subject. It's one of those things, it's easy to start focusing on something. It's really, really easy to lose focus on something. I do it all the time. It's easy to lose your focus. It happens to people every day. People have short attention spans. Most scientists would say that all of you in this building right now have at the most an 8-second attention span and have misheard something I have said or not heard it at all about 3 times. That's probably true based on the fact when I get down and Dad's going to ask me how I thought I did, I'm going to say I don't know. But people have short attention spans. Most people, they would say, have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. And with more information to take in, they think the collective attention span is shortening. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have all of these news networks. It seems I find someone else sharing something from another political publication every day now. We have all of this information to take in, so the time that society spends thinking about something doesn't last nearly as long as it used to. Certain scandals that used to hold the national attention and be headlines in the news for years at a time now spend maybe a month at best. We don't think about things as long as we used to. We don't have the same focus on things that we used to, but why? A lot of information to take in, a lot of things that we can think about. But, it's ironic because, ironically, do we have any Billy Joel fans in here? Any Billy Joel fans? I love Billy Joel. One of my favorites. What a lot of people don't know is actually when Billy Joel was 10 years old, he was baptized into the Church of Christ. And now, as he went on and kind of chased his life as a musician, he kind of left behind religion altogether, as is reflected in these lines that I'm about to show you that I think really show why people lose their focus on God. He says, "I once believed in causes too. I had my pointless point of view and life went on, no matter who was wrong or right." People lose focus. They lose their focus on God because life goes on. It's so hard for us to see the eternal consequences of our actions here on this earth. When Adam and Eve were in the garden, God said, if you eat of the fruit of this tree, you will die. That meant both a spiritual death and a physical death. The spiritual death happened as soon as they took it, but did they know? They only knew that they had to clothe themselves and hide from God. They really didn't know what all that would entail, and Adam didn't really know that he was going to die for another 900 years. He probably got the idea of what death looked like with Cain and Abel, but he himself did not die for over 900 years later. Eternal consequences and long-term consequences don't happen as soon as we commit these things, as soon as we commit sin. The first sip of alcohol rarely ruins a person's life. It's a couple of years, months, or maybe even weeks down the road that it can really destroy their lives and cause some damage. Matthew chapter 5, verses 44 through 45, Jesus says, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust." We don't see God's judgment and the consequences of our actions here on this earth because life goes on. There are many, many people in this world who met today, whether this morning or tonight. They will meet throughout the rest of this week, and they will worship God in an unscriptural and incorrect doctrinally manner. There are people who are committing pagan and idolatrous worship. There are people who aren't worshiping at all. There are evil people on this world that good things happen to them just the same way good things happen to us, because God says one day he will bring everything into judgment, but it's hard for us to think about right now. We don't see the eternal and long-term consequences as easily. Sometimes there are sins that are, we do see those consequences as soon as they happen, but a lot of times there are things that we don't see for maybe 5, 6, 10, 20 years down the road. So how can we fix our focus? How can we change where we're focusing? First of all, we have to think, where are we putting our focus? Are we putting it on things of this world? Or are we doing what Paul tells us we should do in the book of Colossians? In chapter 3, verse 2, he says, "Set your mind on things that are above, not on things of this earth." That's a very simple and very profound statement because, as we said earlier, Jesus has said everything on this earth that you can worry about, that you can think about, it's going to pass away. But if you set your mind on things above, on things that are in heaven, those are the things that are going to be protected, that God is going to protect, and that God is going to make sure nothing happens to. But once we have our focus on heaven, people do it every day. People get baptized, they get restored. Their focus is on heaven. They're thinking about heaven. They're so ready to get their life back on track. But even the average Christian loses focus. It happens all the time. So once we get our focus on heaven, on those things above, how do we keep it there? Just a few verses down in Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 5, Paul writes, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them. But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and having put on the new self." Now, up until this point, this is a rather obvious answer for how we can put our mind on things above. We know that we're supposed to put away those old practices of sin. We know that we're not supposed to think about sinful things, and we're supposed to surround ourselves with good people. But this is where Paul tells you how you can put changing your focus and fixing your focus into action. He says, "Which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of the Creator. Put off the man of sin and continually renew the man that is sanctified." How can we do that? Once we have our focus on God, how can we continually ensure that it stays there? How can we continually renew ourselves? I would tell you that it has something to do with changing our knowledge. Changing our knowledge. And what does that mean? What does it mean to change our knowledge? The end of that verse, Colossians chapter 3, verse 10, "And have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator." Knowledge changes in one of two ways. Number one, it grows, or number two, it shrinks. You forget things or you remember things. It's a very, very simple concept. So how can we ensure that we are renewing ourselves through knowledge? Well, you have to continually be learning about God. Easier said than done. As we said before, sometimes you can get very excited. You're like, I'm going to study my Bible as much as possible. At the first of the year, how many people say they're going to read the Bible through this year? They're going to study and read their Bible every day. How many of them make it past the month of January? Even that far. We get so excited about these things, but how do we continually make sure that we are learning? Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 3, at that time the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them, saying, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Have you ever seen a child learn something new? It's one of the coolest things to me. Children love to learn. I think that that's maybe one of the secrets to growing old. That's my hypothesis. I'll tell you at the end of my experiment, which will be my life, whether or not that is true. But I love to learn new things. I don't like necessarily to sit in a classroom and be lectured to about new things, but whether it's, as I said before, I love to read interviews with famous people or politicians. I love to learn things about people that interest me. I love to read trivia. I have tons of trivial knowledge. I read that fact about Billy Joel being baptized on Wikipedia when I was in the 9th grade. That's one that I've just had stuck in there because I love to learn new things. Children love to learn new things. Have you ever seen a child right after they learn to pray? Right after their parents teach them to pray, and anytime anybody says a prayer, Brian and Rachel's youngest, Kylie, used to do this. When I would hold her and we'd be at lunch with our family, if I was ever holding her and someone would pray, she would grab my hands and she would clasp them together because she was so excited that she had just learned how to pray, and she wanted to make sure that everyone knew that she could do it, and she wanted to make sure everyone else knew how too. Children love to learn. We've got to be like little children. Everything has to be new and amazing to us the same way it is to them. The Bible is chock full of information on how to live your life and how to make your life better. It will guide you through any period of your life, any time of your life that you can think to be going through. And if you have those tools now before you're in those situations, if you do what Daniel did and purpose in your heart before you get to the time when your faith will be tested, it will be so much easier for you to resist the devil and have him flee from you. We have to learn things the same way that children do. We have to grow our knowledge, and this is how we've got to do it. Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9, Paul writes, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." We have got to think about godly things. We've got to think about what is good, what is pure, what is honorable. But how can we do that? Because so often we lose our focus. But how can we keep our focus? How can we continually learn new things? It's in the media we take in. How much time do you spend reading things on Facebook versus reading the Word of God? And this is the part of the sermon where I'm preaching to myself as much as anybody. How much time do you spend scrolling on social media when I know, based on the fact that you are scrolling, if you have any sort of smartphone, you could be scrolling through a passage in the Bible? How often do you spend talking to people on the internet when you could be in prayer talking to God? It's in the media we take in, it's in the television we watch, the movies we watch, the music that we listen to, the radio programs we listen to. It's in all of that media that we take in that is going to direct our focus to or divert our focus away from God. It's in the people that we are around. Are we around people who also have godly mindsets, who also think and meditate on these same things that Paul has told us to think about? My closest friends in the entire world I met right here in this building. There are my closest friends because just the same way as me, they want to get to heaven too. They think about and they meditate on things that are good, things that are honorable, things that are true. And I know that I can lean on them whenever I need that kind of help, and that they are going to help me get to heaven and help me live a life that is better on this earth. Because I have seen in my life when I'm spending more time with them, I am closer to God versus when I'm spending more time with my friends in the world, I'm farther away from Him. It's in how much time we spend talking to and listening to God. We can tell God anything through prayer. We can tell God anything that we are going through, anything that we are thinking, anything we are concerned about. We can take it toward God. I've become a man of fervent prayer over the past year. From my first day of my senior year of high school up until Hopefully I carry that with me through the rest of my life, but I have sat on my bed in my room, I have gotten on my knees, and I have prayed to God to help me make the right decisions. Help me to stay close to Him. It's in how much time we spend with God, and the more time I have seen that I have spent with Him, the more time I have spent talking to Him and letting Him speak to me, the better my life has gone, because there are verses and there are passages in this book that you can carry with you through any period of your life. There are things that God is going to tell you that you can keep through any part of your life. I'm going to show you something that I saw a few years ago. A fella named Brad Montague was speaking up at Horizons at Freed Hardeman one year, and he showed us this. These are the chapters of life according to Mr. Whittle. When Mr. Whittle wrote these, he was 95 and a half years old. That was about 2 years ago, so I don't know how long it had been since he received these, so he's at least 97 and a half if he is still living. But these are at the end of his life, how he outlined the lives that we all live. Infancy, a period of innocence. Youth, a period of discovery. Ages 13 to 19, a period of uncertainty, yet decision. 20 to 30, a period of direction and wonder. 30 to 40, a period of production and expectation. 40 to 70, a period of regret or rejoicing. And finally, 70 and beyond, a period of satisfaction and seeking. Whatever period you are in your life, the best place to be is right next to God. I'm right there, right on the edge of it. There's been a lot of uncertainty in my life, and there still is. I was at lunch with Josh a few weeks ago, and we were talking, as we often do, and I said it's weird because the last time people were asking me where I saw myself in 10 years was at the beginning of high school. That was 4 years ago. Where I saw myself in 10 years then was I've graduated from college, been out for 2 years, working full-time in some form of ministry. Maybe I'm married, maybe I'm not. Kind of a textbook lifestyle. But now if you were to ask me where I saw myself in 10 years, where I see myself at the age of 28, I am married, probably with kids, or getting close to the point where I will start to have kids. I've been working and out of college for 6 years. My life has going some sort of direction. And it's weird to me to think about how much my life is going to change in the next 10 years. Think about how much your life has changed in the past 10 and will change in the next 10. Whatever period of life you are in, whatever chapter of this life you are in, God can guide you. Because I've been in this period of uncertainty and I've made a lot of decisions. God has helped me make every single one of them. Any uncertainty I have had in my life, I have been able to turn to God, and He has been able to guide me and help me and tell me the best thing that I could possibly do for my future self, for my future spouse, for my children that I will one day have, for my grandchildren that hopefully I will one day have. Because I've got to think ahead, because I've got to stay focused on Him. And this is how, if I start now while I'm young, I can do that throughout the rest of my life. If you're in this period of direction and wonder, what more exciting thing to learn about than Jesus Christ, God's Son? If you need direction in your life, God can give it to you. Because there's only one direction that you need to be pointed in, and that is towards heaven. If you are in this period of production and expectation, what do you expect? Because God can help you get it. If you expect a good life, a good family, and good friends, God can help you get that for yourself. What are you producing with your life? Because if you want to produce more, if you want to produce something better, God can help you do that. Because every good and perfect gift comes from God. If you're in this period of regret or rejoicing, what do you regret? Because God can and will wash it away. What are you rejoicing about? Because God can help you rejoice even more, knowing that you have lived and that you have fulfilled the purpose of your life here on this earth, which is to fear God and keep His commandments. If you're in this period of satisfaction and seeking, what are you seeking? What more do you need than to know that God is going to be right there with you when you cross into the next chapter of your life, which would be the eternal one. Are you satisfied with your life at any point in it? Are you okay with the things you are doing? Are you okay with the way you are living? Maybe tonight you need to make some changes. We all do. We make changes in ourselves every day. We have to. We have to continually be better. Maybe it's time for you to be better. Maybe once you had that zeal, that focus that we all want so badly. You know, nobody's ever more on fire for God than when they first become a Christian. Maybe you need that back tonight. Maybe you need that kind of zeal that you once had, and you need the prayers of your fellow brothers and sisters to get that. If you need that, if you need the prayers of the church for strength, if you need the prayers of your brothers and sisters to not fall back into your worldly ways, you feel them creeping up on you, if you need to become a Christian, if you need to become a part of God's family tonight, I can assure you there's no better family to be a part of.